One man lost out on his father's inheritance, getting a rundown house while his siblings made out like fat cats. Though Simon expected it, the laughter made him cringe. However, he got the last laugh and made everyone wish they had treated him better in the beginning. What could have happened? But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Simon was 54 years old when his father passed away and showed up to the family gathering to learn about his dad's inheritance. Everyone looked at him with contempt, but he was determined to walk away with something because his siblings had enough. Once Simon got to the house, he didn't know how to start. Everything was a mess, so he went to his old bedroom. Immediately, he asked himself, "Will it be there?" After searching for a moment, he found what he had hoped to see, and it was just what he needed. Simon was the youngest in his family and had one sister and two brothers. His father was a CEO of a large company. He lived wealthily and had a good home life. His sister and brothers were nice to him because he was the cute one everyone loved. Everything changed when he turned 8 years old and his mother passed away. After Simon's mom passed away, his father changed. He could no longer stand his son, but Simon couldn't figure out why. His mother's funeral was beautiful. In fact, he was the only child out of 4 who didn't get a new outfit for his mom's celebration of life. Overall, his dad refused to buy him a new outfit, even though there was more money. The odd behavior continued. Everyone was allowed to go to college except for Simon. His father made up excuses and then made Simon feel like the bad guy for asking why he couldn't go. Since Simon couldn't go to college, his job didn't pay as well as those of his siblings. They all had degrees and became doctors and lawyers. However, he was poor because his dad said they couldn't afford to send him for formal training. It was crazy. While his brothers and sister lived well, and his dad took care of everything, he had trouble putting food on his table and paying the bills. He wasn't jealous of his siblings, but he wondered why he was excluded since they had been a family long before. Simon lived on a small farm, and his dad only visited once per year. Simon had a beautiful wife and 2 children that he adored above all else. Over time, his dad got sick and passed away. It was no surprise to Simon that he was the last person to know, but he wasn't sad. His father had treated him horribly after his mother died. Simon and his wife attended his dad's funeral. Afterward, his brothers and sister invited him to discuss the old man's inheritance. He was surprised by this because he didn't expect them to share or give if they didn't have to. When Simon showed up to the inheritance meeting, the atmosphere turned sour. Clearly, his sister and brothers thought he was nothing and hadn't expected him to be there. They'd split everything between themselves, leaving the old holiday home for Simon. The properties and possessions were divided. It took 30 minutes to settle him down, and he chose to take the house and never see them again. He immediately went to the property to check it out and saw it was in bad condition. Despite that, he still remembered the good times he'd had there. In fact, most of them involved his beautiful mother, and he relished in that feeling. Once he went inside the house, he realized it was trashed. Simon immediately went to his old room, wondering what might lie ahead. He realizes he had hidden something behind his bed. All was revealed in the end. Simon's facial expression changed immediately once he saw it was still there. The weight of the world fell from his shoulders as he carefully grabbed the cardboard box out of its holderall. However, something happened before he could open it to check. Simon heard loud knocking on the door and wondered if his siblings had changed their minds. Simon opened the door and the police started asking questions about why he was there. He was truthful with his answers, and the cops calmed down when they realized he was the new owner. They'd got complaints from the neighbors, as no one had been there for 10 years. The cops told Simon they understood he had inherited the home, but they explained that the government wanted to confiscate it and had been trying for 4 years. No one ever recorded his father as the rightful owner, so it had sat abandoned. Simon asked if he could go back into the house. However, the police officers told him that wasn't possible. Now that they knew who the owner was, the government would seize the property. He tried to think of ways to enter, but that didn't happen. Simon immediately panicked because no one knew what he had inside the house. In fact, no one needed it but him. He knew he had to call a lawyer, but the only one he knew was his own brother. Simon decided to try it. Peter laughed for a long time. There was nothing to do but let him have his moments so that he might hopefully assist. After talking to Peter about his case, Simon felt he was just a number for his brother. Simon had hoped he could get a discount, but the conversation left him crushed. Still, he had no other options, and Peter would be there with him in court. This battle wasn't easy, but Peter managed to win the case. The house was now Simon's again, but he had to renovate it within 6 months. If he didn't do so, the government would confiscate it again. Throughout it all, Simon only thought of what he had hidden. Simon took his wife and children to see the house. His wife was confused, but he tried to tell her things were improving. Still, she stressed about the legal fees and the idea of paying for major renovations. How was it good news? Simon didn't want to explain himself. All he had to do was take her to that house and show her why he was happy. Simon virtually ran into his house and couldn't contain his excitement. He went directly to his old room and grabbed the box from the hiding place. Luckily, the police officers hadn't searched it while he was kept away, or they'd have found it. Carefully, Simon put the box on a table and opened it. His wife was starting to worry that her husband had completely lost his mind. Then, he pulled the display box out, and she could hardly believe what she saw. He pulled out 4 Rolex watches, and even she recognized them for what they were, even though she didn't know much about them. How had Simon known they were in there? And how did something like this happen? Simon had to explain it. When he was 8 years old, Simon and his father had one of their famous arguments. He knew his dad valued those watches and loved them. Therefore, Simon stole them from his dad's room one night, hiding them under the bed for revenge. He had planned to give the watches back a few days later, but his father called the police and reported them stolen the next day. It became a huge deal, and Simon was too scared to say he'd taken them as a prank. When his mom died, the family never returned to the vacation home, and Simon forgot about the watches. Once he returned, he remembered, and now he could sell them and pay for the house renovations. He called his siblings and asked them to come to the vacation home a few months later. Nothing had changed, so they started laughing. However, he showed up in an expensive car, told them he sold the house and was living comfortably. Simon got his revenge.